Hey everyone! Today we're doing some digital portrait painting based off of an image I found on Pinterest. I'll be going over my process and just some of the things I do when I'm doing some paintings like this one. Let's get right to it. Once I have my references in order, the first thing I do is lay down some basic shapes that represent the volume of what I'm drawing. For heads, I usually go with a sphere combined with this kite shape that I picked up from Steve Houston, who has himself put out a ton of amazing educational content throughout the years. Once I'm confident with the basic proportions of the head, I start drawing in the facial features, plotting out the position of the eyes, the nose, the hairline, and carving out the overall profile of the face, including the jawline. When drawing eyes, I'll start on the one eye, and then once I feel confident with its shape, I'll lay down some guidelines and draw the other eye to match it as closely as possible, while also making the expression in the reference. From there, the process of drawing the face is just a slow refinement of what's already there. This part of the drawing is just making large overall decisions. This is represented by just darkening in lines and just creating larger overall shapes. That will form the painting in the next stage of my illustration process. For other complex objects in the frame, like her hand and these headphones, I follow a similar process of just breaking them down into simpler shapes and then sculpting them to be closer to where they'll be in the end picture. When dealing with fabric at this phase of the illustration, I usually just choose a kind of loose and abstract idea that just gives the impression of what it'll look like in the end. All that's left is to finish deciding on a few little details, especially on the nose here, and resizing the canvas to better suit my final illustration. I usually do this so I don't feel so confined by the aspect ratio of what I'm working on, both for the thumbnailing process if I did one, and the initial sketch phase. Once I'm done with my sketch, I usually end up putting down some broad background colors just to help decide on the overall lighting conditions of the image. Probably where all the most important decisions are made for me in the painting process, because I will paint everything else with this in mind, both in terms of where the shadows will fall and how I will color those shadows. When painting skin, I'll block in large regions of color and the underlying colors that represent the actual hue of the skin, as well as some simple shadows based on where the light is coming from in the illustration. From here begins the gradual process of refinement, adding more saturated colors and bringing out some highlights, as well as darkening the shadows where I feel necessary. Once I'm satisfied with the skin, I'll start blocking in larger regions of color, like in the hair and the overall outfit. But I do like to make sure the skin is in a good place before I leave it, because it is one of my favorite things to paint. I try not to invest too much energy into painting inside the lines for the most part, since the lines serve more of a guidepost than anything else, and later on in the process I'll just be painting over them anyway to merge them with the rest of the painting. If I had one really big flaw as a painter, I'd say that I'm pretty destructive with my paintings. I end up throwing paint onto things like the fingers and then painting over them with the hair, and I have to go back and fix them before I can move on. A bit prematurely, I'm starting the second phase of painting, which is just adding more darker darks and brighter brights. If you're just looking a little dead inside, like, one of the best ways to quickly improve it is just adding these little lights to the eyes and a little bit of pink to things. Just makes them look a lot more human and, not dead inside. Here I'm doing the last little bit of blocking on the sleeves and the coat itself. Like I said in a previous video, this is one of those things where if I just slowed down and took a little more time, I would avoid having to repaint these entirely. But that's the nature of being an artist. It's a gradual improvement over time as you recognize your flaws and strive to correct them. Anyway, now we're back into the more proper second phase of the painting, which is just pushing those values and adding some more specific color information to various sections of the painting. Once I'm more confident that I don't need the lines any further to help define the shapes, I will just drop the opacity and create a single merged layer where all the things I've worked on so far are present. This allows me to gradually erase the lines by painting over them or blending them in one way or another. There may be a few places where I leave the lines alone, like where there might be an intense value shift, or a region like the eyelashes or the line of the lip, where I might play into it and refine those lines into being more a part of the painting. One of the ways I avoid making silly mistakes while working so zoomed in is just by always having another copy of the painting to decide. That way I'm not overworking a particular area compared to everything else. What takes up the majority of my time in this stage of the painting is the gradual adding of darks and lights. I'm building up that shape to make it look more dimensional, more true to the real-world object I'm trying to represent in my stylization. One of the best ways to do a little bit of sanity proofing and just making sure that you're not making any major mistakes is just to take the painting and flip it. Now, this kind of sucks because you'll see a whole ton of issues that you did not see prior, but it also refreshes the image in your mind. You can see those areas you left underworked, or if you've forgotten, or just things that weren't working before. The reason this works is because we get so used to seeing how the painting currently looks that our eyes become blind to the problems. Like, for example, I didn't really do a good job on the shape of the lip or some parts of the jaw shape. But flipping the image really helped me see the problems I had developing, and flipping back similarly shows me the issues that I was adding new. Once I have some basic colors laid down for the hair, I'll go in and sculpt the shape of the hair. I'll use some darks to help push in and lights to pull out. My general technique is just to draw in lines and then gradually paint them out. This is kind of an impressionistic approach to hair where you're just getting the idea of the flow of the hair in, rather than trying to paint every single fiber. Like every other part of the painting, I'll gradually add in more highlights and darks just to push the dimensionality of the hair, until it feels more like a real volume. With the last stage being just adding some single strands of floating light hair to just give the illusion of floaters. It just makes hair look a believable amount of messy, and add a little bit more character to it. I really can't overstate how important frequent canvas flips are. I really can't count the number of times where I'd just sit and feel lost in what to work on next in a painting, and the solution was just to flip it and immediately see what needed to be worked on. One of the things I saw in this painting is that I really needed to get rid of the lines. The lines were making it look a lot more flat than I wanted it to look. So I just went in and gradually painted over all the lines and made sure that they were more hidden in the dark areas of the painting, or just no longer present entirely. As I continue to refine the painting, my goal as an impressionistic painter is not to necessarily get every single detail 100% perfect or true to life or photorealistic. Not even close. My goal is to just give the viewer enough to fill in the rest of their imagination. I personally find that a much more fulfilling experience. But like everything else, that comes down to taste. So when I'm rendering eyes, I don't go overboard with the details. I don't draw every eyelash. I don't draw every fiber of the irises. I just put in enough detail to give the impression of the kind of eye I want to depict. In this case, a somewhat glassy, soft eye. So at the tail end of the rendering process, it's a lot of the same. It is refinement, 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 gradually working the hair to be more where I want it to be, making it look a lot more dimensional, making the fingers look a little less weird, adding some more color to the face and the skin, and making some colors pop, like on the jacket, for example. I spend most of this time just making sure that the planes of the face look nice, and maybe adding a few more spots of detail to the hair. This includes just a few more floaters, like some going over where the headphones are, for example, or just making some of the edges more interesting in general. The last step is almost always adding some specular highlights, especially to the hair and eyes, and a few other areas where that might be existing. Now that rendering is for the most part done, I tend to go in and add just a few color overlays just to make some more interest in the overall image. This is all pretty subtle, like I'll lay them in and then back them off. After that, I'll finish up a few little minor details and do a few more flips just to sanity check myself and make sure there's nothing else I'm forgetting for whatever wild reason. For example, a few extra lines on the hands just to make them pop a little bit more, as well as pushing a few of the dark areas of the jackets just to make it look a little more dimensional. So for this painting, one of the ways I thought to make it really pop is just to add a little bit of a halo around the character. This, along with another additive layer, just made it look like the character was in a more diffused airspace. It just made it feel more merged to the background and maybe a little bit more part of the world it existed in. After that, it's just a few more tweaks and then we're pretty much done. If you enjoyed my process video, please leave it a like. If you want to see more like this, subscribe. And let me know what you think about us in the comments. If you have any questions, I'd always be happy to help. Later!